Everyone. Today I'm continuing on, really kind of wrapping up my year-long series of movies from 1972. And I only have, well, actually two more to go after today. But I had planned my 49th movie, and I actually announced it in my last video, as being on Man of the East, a Italian spaghetti western, although filmed in Yugoslavia, starring Terence Hill. This is one of those movies I really didn't engage with much. I don't have much of anything interesting to say. It's a kind of hodgepodge, a comic western. It was meant to be part of a Trinity series of films that Terence Hill and Bud Spencer made together. But Bud Spencer bowed out, and I guess they had to rewrite the script, and they brought in Harry Carey Jr., who probably has his most energetic role he ever played in the movies. But the comedy, to me, amusing every once in a while, but there's a commentary on this film by Alex Cox, and Alex Cox's commentary is far more entertaining to me than the movie was. And Alex Cox, an expert who wrote a book on spaghetti westerns, he didn't think too much of this film anyways. But I'm only mentioning this because I decided I wanted to, what could I substitute real quick for another film? And there's a whole bunch of films that I could choose, but I decided to go with two short films by Chantel Akerman, who's obviously, for any movie lover, knows that she's been in the movie news, and that's crossed off and over into the regular news. Sight and Sound's decade by decade poll came up this year, 2022, and her 1975 movie, Jean Dielman, was the consensus choice, was on most of the greatest number of ballots that were submitted by the critics. Or rather by the critics. 2001 was number one in the director's poll. And Chantel Akerman, and as I was looking through the films in 1972, I realized there was nothing that was directed by a woman, except for these two short films. At least I could not come across another movie in 1972 directed by a woman. I'm sure there might have been one or two somewhere in the world. So that appealed to me, to have at least one video covering films by a woman filmmaker. But also, compared to Man of the East, Chantel Akerman is just the absolute antithesis of this kind of Man of the East, this commercial, highly commercial, just silly characters of absolutely no meaning at all. So the audience for Man of the East were, most of them, if they were to see a Chantel Akerman film, would probably run for the hills after about 5 minutes, and Chantel Akerman might have run for the hills after watching 5 minutes of Man of the East. It's a totally different audience, totally different approach to cinema, non-commercial cinema of Chantel Akerman, films that in my lifetime only played at film festivals. They were hard to come by, even in repertory theaters. And Chantel Akerman was Belgian. Her mother was a survivor of Auschwitz. Her grandparents were executed by the fascists at Auschwitz. Chantel Akerman, at a young age, she saw Jean-Luc Godard's Pierrot Le Fou, and she decided, that's what I want to do. I want to make movies. She came to New York at a very early age to live for a few years. So in 1972, she was only 22 years old. She had a very close relationship with her mother. And in fact, when she committed suicide in 2015, it was attributed that she was distraught and depressed over her mother's death the previous year. But she stayed in New York for a while, and she would return to New York for other projects. And I believe she actually taught at NYU, or one of the colleges in New York City, and during her career. But when she was in New York, I think she'd already made two films before 1972, short films. And she's attributed to two films in 1972 on the Criterion Channel. The first is La Chambre, and this is The Room, and it's only I think about 6 or 7 minutes long. No, it's I think 12 minutes long, and it's a camera, a stationary camera, as it pans around in a room in an apartment. Look appearing to be a one-room type apartment. So it does a 360-degree pan around the room, encountering clutter everywhere, sink full of dishes, wall hangings, aslant. But as it gradually makes this 360-page angled turn, it comes across Chantel Akerman laying on a bed, sort of posing for the camera, under the covers, posing for the camera, and then it completes another 360-degree turn. And as it passes Chantel Akerman this time, she appears to be in some sort of engaging in some sort of sexual activity under the sheets, but then it doesn't. It goes. I believe it goes approximately 90 degrees and stops, and then goes back 180 degrees. Now this time, as we pass Chantel Akerman, she has got an apple in her hand, and we make this 180-degree pan shot back and forth a few times as we see Chantel Akerman, as we pass by her, eating the apple. And then the film stops. So this is the kind of film you would see in New York at the Anthology Archives. I think that's still there, where the avant-garde films, Michael Snow, Stan Brakhage, Jonas Mekas. I've seen quite a few of these films. I remember going to a festival of avant-garde films where 2 hours of short films one day and 2 hours the next day. It's not my kind of cinema. And I love the theater. I love actors. I love performances. I love made-up stories. So this isn't my ballywick of movies, but it certainly has, as it divests itself of all the commercial aspects. It's showing what a film can do, which is what film can do, what a camera can do. It shows life. What does life look like around us? Is it just fascinating? Can life be fascinating? Can a movie be fascinating? Just seeing the everyday, mundane objects as we circle around a room. The second film, a much longer film, I think it's 1 hour and 2 minutes, is Hotel Monterey. So I guess you could call it more or less a feature film. But like The Room, La Chambre, it has no soundtrack. It is completely silent. So I know I've read where some people actually play music in the background to accompany the film. Hotel Monterey, a real hotel in the Upper West Side. It's actually in 215 West 94th Street. If anybody's going to New York and loves this movie, you want to go see it. But as of 2008, it was a Days Inn. I don't know what it is now, but it was sort of like a residence hotel. So older people would live there, poorer people. This is not any kind of upscale, and certainly in the 1960s, New York City was a pretty seedy place. Even West 94th Street must be upscale by this time, as properties are so expensive. So the object of the movie, as I viewed it, is to show us the hotel from the bottom floor to the top floor through one night. So we get images with now a stationary camera of the lobby. People might pass by here and there. We see some old ladies sitting on a couch. But most of this first third of the film is really, almost the first half is about the elevator. We stand outside the elevator. We watch the elevators from a distance. We stand inside the elevator. So, and in the lobby, there's people getting on and getting off, and some people were obviously, Akerman was there. She did have a cinematographer with a camera, and they were reluctant to go into the elevator. And so then we get a lot of hallway shots, static shots of hallways. And now there's no lighting here. This is in color, as was the other film, La Chambre. And but it's all ambient light. So we look down hallways where the walls are sort of like closing in. They're used as frameworks, and we see lights, exit lights, emergency lights, and we see their reflection. And sometimes we start to we peek into rooms. A pregnant lady sitting on a chair. We go into another room and there's a man sitting totally stationary, staring at the camera, and we think, and he's so still. We think, well, this must be a still life. But then you can, if you look at his hands, he is moving his hands. Now these shots last a long time. A minute or more, where we just stare at hallways, at the elevator, at peeking into people in rooms. And this has been likened to Edward Hopper paintings, who painted many famous paintings around New York City. So it's like still a series of still life paintings, only done with the movie camera. So we go, as we rise up, we go from floor to floor, and now suddenly in the last third of the film, the camera moves and we track down a hallway. We track down to a window, because now daylight has come, so we can't see much out the window, but we do see daylight. We track down a hallway where it comes to like at a corner angle with doors on each side, and somebody peers out, opens the door. The resident there opens the door and peers out. And so then finally we reach the upper floors, and we reach the roof. And now the camera does another pan, and we pan around to see all these other buildings in the distance. And this is all very grainy, 16 millimeter. There's no restoration. I don't know what kind of restoration you would want for a movie like this, but we see the buildings, tall buildings all around. All of them look as seedy and as run down as the Hotel Monterey. We see the Hudson River, we see the Palisades of New Jersey in the background. And then the movie ends. But we never see the outside. We don't see people going in and out of the Hotel Monterey. It's entirely enclosed within the hotel itself. So, I mean, this is not my kind of movie. I would have enjoyed it. I would have been able to get into the mood of the film, I think, much more if I had seen it in the theater. It's so slow moving, and you wonder how long is this shot gonna last. and there's so many distractions at home that I think I would have gotten into the mood of this film. But as an experimental film, it's pretty good. And like I say, I have seen some other films, and you do see a kind of outlook on life, and that with Jean Dielman 3 years later, Chantel Akerman was only 25 when she made what is now the greatest film of all time. She employs Delphine Seyrig, one of the great movie stars of her era, and with a story. So you can use these films to sort of prepare yourself to what Chantel Akerman's view of the world around her might look like. This is, her films are analyzed for their structuralism, their feminism, but this film just seems to be like looking at the world around us in a kind of abstract way, making abstract images out of mundane real-life images, and done not by a painting and not by a still photograph, but by a movie camera. So you can see these two films on the Criterion Channel, and Jean Dielman on the Criterion Channel. Now, if you've never seen some of the films on the Sight and Sound list of films, both the critics and the directors list, Criterion Channel has curated a section And they did this right away, the critic section right away, because Gene Dealman is a Criterion release. And these two films are on a clip set, a Criterion Eclipse set, DVDs. Hotel Monterey and La Chambre. But they've curated, they have, I think, something like 56 of the 100 movies that are on the Criterion Top 100 of the critics list are on the Criterion channel right now, and over 60 movies from the director's list. So that's a great place if you want to go somewhere to catch up on what all these great movies are like. The Criterion reputation for having the great movies, well, that's a pretty good, I think that's a pretty good percentage for one label to have. And certainly I'm going to catch up on some of the ones I haven't seen as well. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I do appreciate it. Comments are welcome. You guys take care.